Okay, wonderful. Well, like Joseph said, my name is Ronnie Landis, and basically what I'm here to do is to share a message or a multitude of messages that are all intertwined together, which brings me to this idea that I've been playing with a lot lately, is this idea of obviousness and refining my perception of what's obvious. And actually just understanding that what was obvious to me 10 years ago, or actually what's obvious to me now, wasn't obvious to me 10 years ago, right? But actually through my own maturation process and kind of looking back on my life and seeing where I'm at now, doing what I'm doing now, because what I'm doing now is completely different than what I was doing 10 years ago. Can anyone relate to that? So now things dawn on me now that I'm like, that is the most obvious thing like ever, but it wasn't obvious to me then for some interesting reason, you know? And so I take a lot of different messages from my upbringing in personal development. I was very big into success philosophy. You know, Tony Robbins was pretty much like my big mentor, and Jim Rohn and Les Brown and Earl Nightingale and Jack Canfield and so many people, names I could rattle off, right? And I had an upbringing of really looking at peak performers, looking at people that just excelled in their life and didn't give into this little thing called excuse-itis, right? And that's been a big kind of theme for me, is that where am I making excuses for my potential? Where am I holding myself back? And then how can I just override that program? How can I just get more of the juice that's inside of me? How can I tap more of that genius potential? How can I activate genius right here and now? That's a question that I ask myself a lot. Not how can I do it tomorrow? How can I do it next week when circumstances are a little better? When I can, you know, when I have my finances dialed in just a little bit more, I have my whatever, my emotions are set in there, kind of lined up, I feel better. Not a year from now, right? Now. How can we turn on the juice now? One of the things I've actually come to realize is that if you want to be more juiced in your life, it's a good idea to start drinking more juice. Really important thing, actually, I found that's activated dormant levels of not just, you know, not just mental or physiological activations inside of me that's allowed me to override inflammation, to override stagnation physically, but it's actually turned on genetic triggers inside of me that now, being into raw food 5-6 years and all these wonderful doodads that we're going to talk about, I can actually feel a level of core essence inside of me that I was unaware of before. Does that make sense? It's a deeper level of power within my body. It's not just an idea. It's not like, oh, that, you know, I'm powerful. Affirmations. It's like, no, I can literally feel, I'm starting to every day be able to tap into some kind of core primordial force that's intrinsic to this body that each one of us is gifted, and that to me now feels pretty obvious. But again, it wasn't obvious. What I'm talking about, this is going to probably make a little more sense as we go down this little journey. It wasn't obvious when I first got started into this. When I first got started into raw food nutrition, because that's one of my big messages, is I actually bring it back to living foods. And we're going to kind of go down that little rabbit hole and go through a sequential order of the way that I like to structure holistic nutrition. Because to me it is holistic. It's not just one thing, right? This lovely lady here asked me, what do you think about B17? And Magdalene, right? Or Laetrile. And I was like, it's great, but that's not the thing. Right? But it's marketed as like, this is the cancer cure. Apricot kernel, that's the thing, right? Or B12, like methylcobalamin, that's the thing. Or whatever, that is the thing. How many times have we heard this in our infomercial reality and everything? Like, you know, that's the thing for 5 payments of $19.99, and if you act now before this timer runs out, you'll get the Philosopher's Stone to eternal youth. But you got to act now. You got to pick up the phone. How many times have we all heard that kind of story? Right? We've been like burnt out on that, right? And it's actually caused us to be a little jaded. I've noticed that in society. I noticed that with people. So people are hungry for this new framework of health, because people are realizing the pharmaceutical allopathic reality, it just ain't the deal. right? I grew up with Tony Robbins. One of the things I got from Tony Robbins is that you can philosophize, you can theorize all day long, but if it's not producing results, then you might need to reevaluate. You might need to actually change your bias. You know, a lot of times in life we're going down this road and we're sticking to our guns, right? We're going to go down with the ship. Right? There's a really great phrase I want to share. The Titanic was built by experts. The Ark was built by amateurs. Something to think about, right? We put all our trust into some kind of authoritative figure. Maybe someone with a white trench coat that possibly slapped us when we came out of the womb. That may have actually traumatized us from birth. You know? Right? So we put our hands, or we put our power in the hands of other people and expect them to actually guide us. I know it's okay, government, here you go. No problem, I know, you know, you're gonna lead us to where we want to go, the promised land. Or the doctors or the dentists, whatever. We all know the deal, right? So I think what's happening in our society and why I'm so passionate about this message and kind of being part of that millennial generation, where my generation, we walked into this world like we want to know. We are somehow, like every generation I think that happens, it just, the veil is already kind of lifted just a little bit more. So I kind of came in like, look, I want to know what's going on. I want to know the truth. And I find actually now it's all converging that my parents' generation, a lot of people here, I can only guess, are kind of realizing like, hey, you know what? I'm not getting the results that I thought that I was going to get from the instruction of my pharmacist or my doctor or my dentist, right? And I'm not even here to say that they are bad people or they're wrong or to point fingers. That's not why I'm here, right? I'm just here to make distinctions. That's my purpose. That's why I love getting in front of audiences like yourselves and just ranting and raving about this stuff, because ultimately what it's all about at the end of the day, if you want to find your own inner genius, you want to activate that juice within you, it comes down to refinement of distinction. Refining the distinctions we make in our life. That's what this whole thing's going to be about. That's what this whole talk's going to be about. I remember Jim Rohn said that, you guys know who Jim Rohn is? The late and great success philosopher, one of the all-time great and most inspirational philosophers and speakers on. So he was actually Tony Robbins' direct mentor. And I had the privilege of knowing about him from a young age. He said something very interesting that I think he didn't even realize how profound it was, is that success is simply a refinement or a refined study of the obvious. We overcomplicate things all the time. That's what we do. Humans, that's what we do. We're but right here, it's right in our face. In fact, I will go out on a limb, and this is my observation. I think the evidence, at least in my own life, is very clear on this, is that whatever you need is usually right in front of you. But it's camouflaged. It's camouflaged in a veil of obviousness. Right? But we've been taught to get out of our instincts, out of pattern recognition, recognizing the patterns in life. How do the patterns show up? When I do this, what tends to happen? If I'm in a relationship and my spouse says this and I respond with this, what is the pattern? Sometimes we need a pattern interrupt. Sometimes that's called cancer. Sometimes that's called diabetes or colitis or whatever myriad of names that we give to these things. This is basically just us hitting the guardrail of life. That's kind of just what I've kind of put together in my own understanding and trying to figure out like what's going on in the world and how can we create a solution.